Hey everyone, in today's video we're going to be talking about what game our community could pivot to in the event that EVE Echoes was cancelled, shut down, put into maintenance mode, whatever phrase you want to use. So let's get started, shall we? In EVE Echoes we have our community, and our community is built up of a variety of different players. We have the players that enjoy PvP, the players that enjoy industry because they like to tinker with things. We have the casual and the hardcore. We have a variety of different playstyles. So in the event that we all chose to completely abandon EVE and say we don't like NetEase anymore, blah blah blah, let's say the game in a year's time just completely dies and we're all forced to go and find a new game to join. The purpose of this video is to figure out what sort of game meets the criteria that the majority of our player base could successfully migrate to. Say the majority because you're always going to lose someone in that transaction or whatever the word is I'm trying to think of right now. So first and foremost, it's a sci-fi game that has a very particular appeal to it, but it's also the most restrictive. When I say the most restrictive, there's a lot more games out there that don't have this spaceship sci-fi appeal. And I think to dictate that a alternative to EVE Echoes has to be a spaceships game would be a bit naive this early on. Of course, a lot of people are immediately going to point to EVE Online and say, it is the superior game, why don't we all just play EVE Online? After all, with EVE Anywhere, you can play it on your phone anyway, so why not? There's no reason not to, right? Kind of wrong a little bit there. The next criteria is about the game's accessibility. As some of you regular viewers might be aware, I have stopped doing the videos on an Echoes perspective. The purpose that I stopped doing those videos was exactly what I'm alluding to right now, accessibility. EVE Online, as superior as a game it is, on a mobile device, it's just not accessible in a mobile-friendly format. In order to use it, you need a much stronger internet connection than you require with EVE Echoes, and you require peripherals such as a Bluetooth mouse just to be able to successfully click on things. So it's nowhere near as accessible. You're not going to be using it as you hop into town, sort out your PI whilst you're walking. That's just not really a thing you're going to be able to do with EVE Online. And it all doesn't come down to just the technology, it comes down to the gameplay as well. The gameplay for EVE Online is structured so that you are sat at a computer with 100% attention span on the game. EVE Echoes, the reason why there's still so many of us playing EVE Echoes is because we enjoy the flexibility with regards to our attention span. If the children come along knocking on the door and demand our attention, or maybe, doorbell goes, maybe you're playing the game at work, whatever the reason is, the EVE Echoes is a lot more flexible. So we need the EVE Echoes' replacement game to have that same level of accessibility. And that's the main crutch of this video. This is going to be the strongest talking factor for what game replaces EVE. But again, we have other factors to consider as well. For example, a player-driven economy. A lot of us are driven with EVE to succeed with the whole player-driven economy. The whole rarity of items and so on. We need suitable endgame experience so that there's always something more to achieve within the game, some kind of new level to grind. We need I wouldn't say pay to win system that's friendly, but we need a form of monetization that isn't completely aggressive and respects the player. Yeah, there's a whole multitude of things that we need to find in a game before we can successfully migrate away from EVE Echoes. We've seen games come and go over the past year or two. We've seen Diablo 4, which had even worse was it Diablo 4? Was it just Diablo Mobile? Diablo Immortal, there we go. Diablo 4 is in the news because it's coming up or something. I don't know. I don't pay attention to that particular game series. But we've had Diablo Immortal, which was incredibly heavy on monetization. We've had what was NetEase's other game? It was the name eludes me, and you know what game it is. Say in the chat if you remember what game it is before I do. Anyway, we've got that space-based game. We all know what it is if we can remember the name. Even Captain Benzie was commissioned to do a number of videos on it. There we go, Infinite Lagrange. So there's that game, but the gameplay doesn't sync up with Eve Echoes. It's completely different. It's your own little personal empire game with a bit of PvP and so on. We've also seen other space-based games like Homeworld Mobile, which didn't at all take off. And yeah, when I looked up videos for it the other day, there's a lack of content creators and an even more of a lack of people just consuming the content. The point that I'm getting at here is there's no immediate game that's jumping out to me that's sci-fi based that the community could immediately jump to. Which comes back to what I was saying earlier, it doesn't have to be sci-fi based. I'm sure we can all change that little bit of a taste as we go. Because when it comes to, say, board games, because Eve Echoes shares something similar with many MMOs, and that is the fact that it is a communal experience. We play the game with our friends. We might not know who our friends are until we meet them in game, but we play it with our friends. And one thing I've come to experience in board games nights, for example, is you don't always necessarily enjoy the game that you are playing with your friends. You know, if you were to choose the game yourself, you'd probably never pick that game. But you're with your friends, and it's your friends that make that game exciting. And for me personally, that's the position I'm in with Eve Echoes. It's the friends that make the game exciting. And if a new game came along that all of my friends wanted to try out and leave Eve Echoes in the dust, I probably would. But as long as my core group of friends are still playing Eve Echoes, I'm going to stick around for a bit longer. I'm just being honest, you know. But yeah, the point that I'm getting at is, let's say another game like RuneScape. I don't know anything about RuneScape personally. I played it probably in the early 2000s for about 30 minutes when I had dial-up for my internet connection, so you know it wasn't exactly ideal back in those conditions. So my experience of RuneScape is very limited from those 30 minutes all the way back in the early 2000s. But if the community pivoted to that game, for example, if that happened to meet all of the same criteria that I've listed so far, excluding of course the sci-fi aspect, I'd probably pivot to it with the community. But yeah, that's this ramble really. What makes Eve Echoes successful? What factors? Well, when I say successful, we kind of know that it isn't particularly successful at the moment. But the question I'm going to put to you is, for those of you that are still listening, because this is quite the ramble probably by now, is what makes the game work for you? If you were to just put your blinders on, ignore for a moment that there are problems with this game and NetEase could treat it better, and write in the comments what you like about this game and what you'd like to see in another game that would draw you across. Because if this game truly is dying, and we see comments about it all of the time, I'll see it in my comments on my channel, people will talk about it in various podcasts, other YouTube videos, various Discords. The topic comes up all of the time, it's impossible to ignore. So let's assume, just for the sake of this video, that the game does eventually die, whether it's in a month's time, 6 months' time, a year's time, whatever the case may be. If the game was to die and we were to pivot the community to another game, what would we look for in another game to pivot the community towards? I don't know. There's a lot to think about here. I know a lot of people are going to immediately jump to EVE Online. That's to be expected, but it's not for everyone. The first component that I'm going to put into the equation is, of course, the mobile phone aspect, the accessibility. But anyway, I think I've rambled enough about this particular topic. Yeah, feel free to hit like or subscribe. Throw down some comments in the comment section below about what you'd like to see in another game if we were to transition away to another game as a community. And I guess I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks again.